All right, not bad timing. A little late. Not bad, though.
Hello, everybody. You think so?
Clipping.
Stop the clipping. Okay. Can't win with the audio for this, can we?
Nope, never. Hey, Galaxy, we're doing good. How are you doing?
Oh, hey, man.
I mean, I'm kind of tired.
I'm
It's been a long day.
I'm tired too.
Yeah, fair enough. I feel like my day hasn't been as long.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I was taking care of animals, shoveling poop all day.
Mm-hmm.
I ran around with an 8-year-old and baked cookies. I feel it's just as tiring sometimes.
In a certain kind of way, yeah.
Hey, Kimberly.
I just saw the YouTube notification. I remember when you read Harry Potter. It's been forever. Yeah, it was a long time ago. Oh, Galaxy is like, let's do this. Let's read some Dracula. Yeah. So I found out that Tumblr does this thing called Dracula Daily.
What? Why? What?
So Dracula Daily, I guess, is a thing that Tumblr does every year.
Sounds like a Tumblr thing.
From the first day that the novel starts, you get like an email notification every day from the date of the start of the novel till the date of the last journal entry in the novel.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like you read the emails that are like the chapters of the book in real time.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Do a thing instead of just releasing the audiobook for Dracula. We're gonna save it and just release each diary page as the days come up.
That's what they do.
I mean, that's kind of cool.
It is kind of cool. But some of the posts that people post are very funny about it.
Was this where you were saying like you like vindicated me for saying that it was like Monty Python that other people have noticed?
Yeah.
Like, how dumb Jonathan was. Well, we found out how dumb everyone is.
Yeah. Yeah. This
Like Mina's like, oh, she's having the same symptoms Lucy had. Dracula lives next door and weird stuff is going on. What could it possibly be?
Yeah. Yeah. There was one person last night who was literally like, the patriarchy is so toxic that it's keeping everyone from finding out the truth, because Mina is like, oh, I don't want to upset anyone. I'm just not going to tell anyone what's going on.
Yeah.
Or, yeah.
I don't know. It was, we got into it last time. I'm not going to get into it again.
Yeah.
That's basically the whole recap. Last time on Dracula, everyone except Mina was an idiot.
Yeah, pretty much. I did see another meme where these people are like,
Mina, I don't know. I don't think Mina is quite safe from the judgment here, because she also understands what happened to Lucy. She had this dream of Dracula and everything, this nightmare, the fog rolling in, and she's just like, I just must be stressed.
yeah. I did see another one where people are like, oh, it's that time of year again. I hope my good friend Jonathan Harker has a great time on his business trip and that nothing terrible happens.
Yes. Quick, easy out, 20-minute adventure.
Yeah, Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
That's the whole like thing of it. They're like, oh, she's just tired. We must protect her at all costs. She's fine. She just needs more sleep.
No, we can't bring this up. She's lady things. What can I say, right?
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much.
She obviously just can't handle the stress like us men.
The other thing I noticed was that people were like, Van Helsing is trying to figure it out. Dr. Seward is like the man of science and he's trying to figure it out. And then this Texan comes in and says, this kind of sounds like the vampire bats that bite my cows. And then Van Helsing is just like, oh, well.
Maybe it's a cow.
And like, it just Quincy, the American, just throws some wild shit out there. And like, he's right.
Yeah. Also, the guy that everyone else like, we need garlic, we need rituals and all this to catch and kill Dracula. Quincy's like, ooh, a bat. Let me shoot it.
Yeah. How about a gun?
It's nice to know America has not changed in the past couple hundred years.
I think it's even funnier that it's an Irishman writing an American.
Right.
And it's like, I shoot it. That's my character. I shoot stuff. Just, yeah, I don't know. It's very funny.
Yeah, Quincy's one of my favorite characters so far. He's great whenever he comes in.
That's the one thing I like about where the book is going right now is he's in it more.
Yeah.
So that's nice. Should we just start?
Yeah, we can just jump right in because, like I said, jokes aside, that is pretty much what happened. Like, you're caught up. Dracula is sucking Mina dry, and everyone is too oblivious to the situation and focused on their own stuff to not even notice it. Renfield is trying to tell them, but can't, and Seward is just not, I don't want to say not competent enough, but he's just not getting it, man.
He's supposed to
Renfield
be like
is trying.
He's supposed to be like the smart guy, and he constantly just
And Van Helsing
doesn't
is off
get it.
doing his experiments, and maybe Van Helsing actually knows what's up. But we also know that Van Helsing is the type that is not going to tell anyone directly.
Oh my god, he has to dance around everything all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
You have to learn it for yourself.
There we go. I was getting to the chapter that we need to read.
Okay, I couldn't remember what chapter.
Yeah, we're on chapter 21.
Ooh, okay.
The very last thing that happened was that they found Renfield like covered in blood.
That's right. And my theory was that it was Mina's, and that
Yeah.
Mina was currently being eaten by Renfield.
Yes, that was your hunch.
I should have changed this to change it to Roman numerals. That would have been cool.
It would have been. That's okay though.
I didn't think about that. Like, I made this before I did the thumbnails. It would have been a nice little touch, but yeah,
That's okay.
shoulda, coulda, woulda. I guess for the next book I can do that.
That's true. Okay. Oh, Sparsh wants to know if they are ever going to get A Song of Ice and Fire back. Are we ever going to start reading A Song of Ice and Fire again?
We are working on that.
Yes, it will be back. We do not have a date for you, but it will be back. We will do it. We have not just dropped it by the wayside. Are we ready? Okay. All right. Well, here we go. Chapter 21. Dr. Seward's Diary. 3rd October. Let me put down with exactness all that happened, as well as I can remember it, since last I made an entry. Not a detail that I can recall must be forgotten. In all calmness I must proceed. When I came to Renfield's room, I found him lying on the floor on his left side in a glittering pool of blood. When I went to move him, it became at once apparent that he had received some terrible injuries. There seemed none of that unity of purpose between the parts of the body which marks even lethargic sanity. As the face was exposed, I could see that it was horribly bruised, as though it had been beaten against the floor. Indeed, it was from the face wounds that the pool of blood originated. The attendant who was kneeling beside the body said to me as we turned him over, "I think, sir, his back is broken. See, both his right arm and leg and the whole side of his face are paralysed." How such a thing could have happened puzzled the attendant beyond measure. He seemed quite bewildered, and his shoulders were gathered in as he said, "I can't understand these two things. How could he mark his face like that by beating his own head on the floor? I saw a young woman do it once at the Eversfield Asylum before anyone could lay hands on her, and I suppose he might have broke his neck by falling out of bed, if he got in an awkward kink. But for the life of me, I can't imagine how the two things occurred. If his back was broke, he couldn't beat his head, and if his face was like that before the fall out of bed, there would be marks on it." I said to him, "Go to Dr. Van Helsing and ask him to kindly come here at once. I want him without an instant's delay." The man ran off, and within a few minutes the professor, in his dressing gown and slippers, appeared. When he saw Renfield on the ground, he looked keenly at him a moment, and then turned to me. I think he recognized my thought in my eyes, for he said very quietly, manifestly for the ears of the attendant, "Ah, a sad accident. He will need very careful watching and much attention. I shall stay with you myself, but first I must dress myself. If you will remain, I shall in a few minutes join you." The patient was now breathing stertorously, and it was very easy to see that he had suffered some terrible injury. Van Helsing returned with extraordinary celerity, bearing with him a surgical case. He'd evidently been thinking and had his mind made up, for almost before he looked at the patient, he whispered to me, "Send the attendant away. We must be alone with him when he becomes conscious after the operation." So I said, "I think that'll do now, Simmons. We have done all that we can at present. You'd better go your round, and Dr. Van Helsing will operate. Let me know instantly if there be anything unusual anywhere." The man withdrew, and we went into strict examination of the patient. The wounds of the face were superficial. The real injury was a depressed fracture of the skull, extending right up through the motor area. The professor thought a moment and said, "We must reduce the pressure and get back to normal conditions as far as can be. The rapidity of the suffusion shows the terrible nature of his injury. The whole motor area seems affected. The suffusion of the brain will increase quickly, so we must trephine at once or it will be too late." As he was speaking, there was a soft tapping at the door. I went over and opened it, and found in the corridor without Arthur and Quincy in pyjamas and slippers. The former spoke. "I heard your man call up Dr. Van Helsing and tell him of an accident, so I woke Quincy, or rather called for him, as he was not asleep. Things are moving too quickly and too strangely for sound sleep for any of us these times. I've been thinking that tomorrow night we'll not see things as they have been. We'll have to look back and forward a little more than we have done. May I come in?" I nodded and held the door open till they had entered. Then I closed it again. When Quincy saw the attitude and state of the patient, and noted the horrible pool on the floor, he said, "My God, what has happened to him? Poor devil." I told him briefly, and added that we expected he would recover consciousness after the operation, for a short time, at all events. He went at once and sat down on the edge of the bed with Godalming beside him. We all watched in patience. "We shall wait," said Van Helsing, "just long enough to fix the best spot for trephining, so that we may most quickly and perfectly remove the blood clot, for it is evident that the hemorrhage is increasing." The minutes during which we waited passed with fearful slowness. I had a horrible sinking in my heart, and from Van Helsing's face I gathered that he felt some fear or apprehension as to what was to come. I dreaded the words Renfield might speak. I was positively afraid to think, but the conviction of what was coming was on me, as I have read of men who've heard the death watch. The poor man's breathing came in uncertain gasps. Each instant he seemed as though he would open his eyes and speak, but then would follow a prolonged stertorous breath, and he would relapse into a more fixed insensibility. Inured as I was to sick beds and death, this suspense grew and grew upon me. I could almost hear the beating of my own heart, and the blood surging through my temples sound like blows from a hammer. The silence finally became agonizing. I looked at my companions one after another, and saw from their flushed faces and damp brows that they were enduring equal torture. There was a nervous suspense over all of us, as though overhead some dread bell would peal out powerfully when we should least expect it. At last there came a time when it was evident that the patient was sinking fast. He might die at any moment. I looked up at the professor and caught his eyes fixed on mine. His face was sternly set as he spoke. "There is no time to lose. His words may be worth many lives. I have been thinking so I stood here. It may be there is a soul at stake. We shall operate just above the ear." Without another word he made the operation. For a few moments the breathing continued to be stertorous. Then there came a breath so prolonged it seemed as though it would tear open his chest. Suddenly his eyes opened and became fixed in a wild, helpless stare. This was continued for a few moments, then it softened into a glad surprise, and from the lips came a sigh of relief. He moved convulsively, and as he did so, said, "I'll be quiet, Doctor. Tell them to take off the strait waistcoat. I've had a terrible dream, and it has left me so weak that I cannot move. What's wrong with my face? It feels all swollen, and it smarts dreadfully." He tried to turn his head, but even with the effort his eyes seemed to grow glassy again, so I gently put it back. Then Van Helsing said in a quiet, grave tone, "Tell us your dream, Mr. Renfield." As he heard the voice, his face brightened through its mutilation, and he said, "That is Dr. Van Helsing. How good it is of you to be here. Give me some water, my lips are dry, and I shall try to tell you. I dreamed—" He stopped and seemed fainting. I called quietly to Quincy, "The brandy, it is in my study, quick." He flew and returned with a glass, the decanter of brandy and a carafe of water. We moistened the parched lips, and the patient quickly revived. It seemed, however, that his poor injured brain had been working in the interval, for when he was quite conscious, he looked at me piercingly with an agonized confusion, which I shall never forget, and said, "I must not deceive myself. It was no dream, but all a grim reality." Then his eyes roved round the room. As they caught sight of the two figures sitting patiently on the edge of the bed, he went on, "If I were not sure already, I would know from them." For an instant his eyes closed, not with pain or sleep, but voluntarily, as though he were bringing all his faculties to bear. When he opened them, he said hurriedly, and with more energy than he had yet displayed, "Quick, Doctor, quick, I am dying. I feel that I have but a few minutes, and then I must go back to death, or worse. Wet my lips with brandy again. I have something that I must say before I die, or before my poor crushed brain dies, anyhow. Oh, thank you. It was that night after you left me, when I implored you to let me go away. I couldn't speak then, for I felt my tongue was tied, but I was as sane then, except in that way, as I am now." What was that? "I was in an agony of despair for a long time after you left me. It seemed hours. But there came a sudden peace to me. My brain seemed to become cool again, and I realized where I was. I heard the dogs bark behind our house, but not where he was." As he spoke, Van Helsing's eyes never blinked, but his hand came out and met mine and gripped it hard. He did not, however, betray himself. He nodded slightly and said, "Go on," in a low voice. Renfield proceeded. "He came up to the window in the mist, as I had seen him often before, but he was solid then. Not a ghost, and his eyes were fierce like a man's when angry. He was laughing with his red mouth. The sharp white teeth glinted in the moonlight when he turned to look back over the belt of the trees to where the dogs were barking. I couldn't ask him to come in at first, though I knew he wanted to, just as he had wanted all along. Then he began promising me things, not in words, but by doing them." He was interrupted by a word from the professor. "How?" "By making them happen, just as he used to send in the flies when the sun was shining. Great big fat ones with steel and sapphire on their wings, and big moths in the night with skull and crossbones on their back." Van Helsing nodded to him as he whispered to me unconsciously, The Acherontia etetropos of the Sphinges, what you call the death's head moth." The patient went on without stopping. Then he began to whisper, "Rats, rats, rats, hundreds, thousands, millions of them, and every one alive, and dogs to eat them, and cats too, all lives, all red blood, with years of life in it, and not merely buzzing flies." I laughed at him, for I wanted to see what he could do. Then the dogs howled way beyond the dark trees in his house. He beckoned me to the window. I got up and looked out, and he raised his hands and seemed to call out without using any words. A dark mass spread over the grass, coming out like the shape of a flame of fire, and then he moved the mist to the right and to the left. Wait, what the hell? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I just got confused for a second, right? I laughed at him, for I wanted to see what he could do. Then the dogs howled way beyond the dark trees in his house. He beckoned me to the window. I got up and looked out, and he raised his hands and seemed to call out without using any words. A dark mass spread over the grass, coming on like the shape of a flame of fire. And then he moved the grass, coming on like the shape of a flame of fire. And then he moved the mist to the right and left, and I could see that there were thousands of rats with their eyes blazing red, like his, only smaller. He held up his hand, and they all stopped, and I thought he seemed to be saying, "All these lives will I give you, aye, and many more and greater, through countless ages, if you will fall down and worship me." And then a red cloud, like the colour of blood, seemed to close over my eyes, and before I knew what I was doing, I found myself opening the sash and saying to him, "Come in, Lord and Master." The rats were all gone, but he slid into the room through the slash, though it was only open an inch wide, just as the moon herself has often come in through the tiniest crack, and has before me in all her size and splendour. His voice was weaker, so I moistened his lips with the brandy again, and he continued, but it seemed as though his memory had gone on working in the interval, for his story was further advanced. I was about to call him back to the point, but Van Helsing whispered to me, "Let him go on. Do not interrupt him. He cannot go back, and maybe could not proceed at all if he once lost the thread of his thought." He proceeded. "All day I waited to hear from him, but he did not send me anything, not even a blowfly, and when the moon got up I was pretty angry with him. When he slid in through the window, though it was shut, and did not even knock, I got mad with him. He sneered at me, and his white face looked out of the mist with his red eyes gleaming, and he went on as though he owned the whole place, and I was no one. He didn't even smell the same as he went by me. I couldn't hold him. I thought that somehow Mrs. Harker had come into the room." The two men sitting on the bed stood up and came over, standing behind them so that he could not see them, but where they could hear better. They were both silent, but the professor started and quivered. His face, however, grew grimmer and sterner still. Renfield went on without noticing. When Mrs. Harker came in to see me this afternoon, she wasn't the same. It was like tea after the teapot had been watered. Here we all moved, but no one said a word. He went on. I didn't know that she was still here till she spoke, and she didn't look the same. I don't care for the pale people. I like them with lots of blood in them, and hers had all seemed to have run out. I didn't think of it at the time, but when she went away I began to think, and it made me mad to know that he had been taking the life out of her. I could feel that the rest quivered as I did, but we remained otherwise still. So when he came tonight, I was ready for him. I saw the mist stealing in, and I grabbed it tight. I'd heard that madmen have unnatural strength, and as I knew I was a madman, at times anyhow, I resolved to use my power. Aye, and he felt it too. He had to come out of the mist to struggle with me. I held tight, and I thought I was going to win, for I didn't mean him to take any more of her life, till I saw his eyes. They burned into me, and my strength became like water. He slipped through it, and when I tried to cling to him, he raised me up and flung me down. There was a red cloud before me and a noise like thunder, and the mist seemed to steal away under the door. His voice was becoming fainter, and his breath more stertorous. Van Helsing stood up instinctively. We know the worst now, he said. He is here, and we know his purpose. It may not be too late. Let us be armed, the same as we were the other night, but not lose no time. There is not an instant to spare. There was no need to put our fear, nay, our conviction into words. We shared them in common. We all hurried and took from our rooms the same things we had when we entered the Count's house. The Professor had his ready, and as we met in the corridor, he pointed to them significantly, and as he said, They never leave me, and they shall not till this unhappy business is over. Be wise also, my friends. It is no common enemy that we deal with. Alas, alas, that that dear Madam Mina should suffer. He stopped. His voice was breaking, and I don't know if rage or terror predominated in his own heart. Outside the Harkers' door we paused. Art and Quincy held back, and the latter said, Should we disturb her? We must, said Van Helsing grimly. If the door be locked, I shall break it in. May it not frighten her terribly? It is unusual to break into a lady's room. Van Helsing said solemnly, You are always right, but this is life and death. All chambers are alike to the doctor, and even when they are not, they are all as one to me tonight. Friend John, when I turn the handle, if the door does not open, do put your shoulder down and shove. And you too, my friends. Now. He turned the handle as he spoke, but the door did not yield. We threw ourselves against it. With a crash it burst open, and we almost fell headlong into the room. The Professor did actually fall, and I saw across him as he gathered himself up from hands and knees. What I saw appalled me. I felt my hair rise like bristles on the back of my neck, and my heart seemed to stand still. The moonlight was so bright that through the thick yellow blind the room was light enough to see. On the bed beside the window lay Jonathan Harker, his face flushed and breathing heavily as though in a stupor. Kneeling on the edge of the bed, facing outwards, was the white-clad figure of his wife. Beside her stood a tall, thin man, clad in black. His face was turned from us, but the instant we saw, we all recognized the Count, in every way, even to the scar on his forehead. With his left hand he held both Mrs. Harker's hands, keeping them away with her arms at full tension. His right hand gripped her by the back of the neck, forcing her face down on his bosom. Her white neckdress was smeared with blood, and a thin stream trickled down the man's bare breast, which was shown by his torn-open dress. The attitude of the two had a terrible resemblance to a child forcing a kitten's nose into a saucer of milk to compel it to drink. As we went into the room, the Count turned his face, and the hellish look that I had heard described seemed to leap into it. His eyes flamed red with devilish passion. The great nostrils of the white aquiline nose opened wide and quivered at the edge, and the white sharp teeth behind the full lips of the blood-dripping mouth champed together like those of a wild beast. With a wrench which threw his victim back upon the bed as though hurled from a height, he turned and sprang at us. But by this time the professor had gained his feet and was holding towards him with the envelope which contained the sacred wafer. The Count suddenly stopped, just as poor Lucy had done outside the tomb, and cowered back. Further and further back he cowered as we, lifting our crucifixes, advanced. The moonlight suddenly failed as a great black cloud sailed across the sky, and when the gaslight sprang up under Quincy's match, we saw nothing but a faint vapor. This, as we looked, trailed under the door, which was the recoil from its bursting open, had swung back to its old position. Van Helsing, Art, and I moved forward to Mrs. Harker, who by this time had drawn her breath, and with it had given a scream so wild, so ear-piercing, so despairing, that it seems to me now that it will ring in my ears to my dying day. For a few seconds she lay in her helpless attitude and disarray. Her face was ghastly, with a pallor which was accentuated by the blood which smeared her lips and cheeks and chin. From her throat trickled a thin stream of blood. Her eyes were mad with terror. Then she put before her face her poor crushed hands, which bore on their whiteness the red mark of the Count's terrible grip, and from behind them came a low, desolate wail, which made the terrible scream seem only the quick expression of an endless grief. Van Helsing stepped forward and drew the coverlet gently over her body, whilst Art, after looking at her face for an instant despairingly, ran out of the room. Van Helsing whispered to me, "Jonathan is in a stupor such as we know the vampire can produce. We can do nothing with poor Madam Mina for a few moments till she recovers herself. I must wake him." He dipped the end of a towel in cold water and began to flick him on the face, his wife all the while holding her face between her hands and sobbing in a way that was heartbreaking to hear. I raised the blind and looked out the window. There was much moonshine, and as I looked I could see Quincy Morris run across the lawn and hide himself in the shadow of a great yew tree. It puzzled me to think why he was doing this, but at the instant I heard Harker's quick exclamation as he woke to partial consciousness and turned to the bed. On his face, as there might be, was a look of wild amazement. He seemed dazed for a few seconds, and then full consciousness seemed to burst upon him all at once, and he started up. His wife was aroused by the quick movement and turned to him with her arms stretched out as though to embrace him. Instantly, however, she drew them in again, and putting her elbows together, held her hands before her face, and shuddered till the bed beneath her shook. In God's name, what does this mean?" Harker cried out. "Dr. Seward, Dr. Van Helsing, what is it? What has happened? What is wrong? Mina, my dear, what is it? What does that blood mean? My God, has it come to this?" And raising himself to his knees, he beat his hands wildly together. "Good God, help us! Help her! Oh, help her!" With a quick movement, he jumped from bed and began to pull on his clothes, all the man in him awake at the need for instant exertion. "What has happened? Tell me all about it," he cried without pausing. "Dr. Van Helsing, you love Mina, I know. Oh, do something to save her. It cannot have gone too far yet. Guard her while I look for him." His wife, through her terror and horror and distress, saw some sure danger to him. Instantly forgetting her own grief, she seized hold of him and cried out, No, Jonathan, you must not leave me. I have suffered enough tonight, God knows, without the dread of his harming you. You must stay with me. Stay with these friends who will watch over you." Her expression became frantic as she spoke, and he, yielding to her, she pulled him down sitting on the bedside and clung to him fiercely. Van Helsing and I tried to calm them both. The professor held up his little golden crucifix and said with wonderful calmness, "Do not fear, my dear. We are here, and while this is close to you, no foul thing can approach. You are safe for tonight, and we must be calm and take counsel together." She shuddered and was silent, holding down her head on her husband's breast. When she raised it, his white night-robe was stained with blood where her lips had touched, and where the thin open wound on her neck had sent forth drops. The instantly she saw it, she drew back with a low wail and whispered amongst choking sobs, "Unclean, unclean. I must touch him or kiss him no more, or that it should be that this is who I am now, his worst enemy, and who he may have cause to fear." To this he spoke out resolutely. "Nonsense, Mina. It is a shame to me to hear such a word. I would not hear it of you, and I shall not hear it from you. May God judge me by my deserts, and punish me with more bitter suffering than even this hour, if by any act or will of mine anything ever come between us." He put out his arms and folded her to his breast, and for a while she lay there sobbing. He looked at us over her bowed head with eyes that blinked damply above his quivering nostrils. His mouth was set as steel. After a while her sobs became less frequent and more faint, and then he said to me, speaking with a studied calmness which I felt tried his nervous power to the utmost, "And now, Dr. Seward, tell me all about it. Too well I know the broad fact. Tell me all that has been." I told him exactly what had happened, and he listened with seeming impassiveness, but his nostrils twitched and his eyes blazed as I told him how the ruthless hands of the Count had held his wife in that terrible and horrid position, with her mouth to the open wound in his breast. It interested me even at that moment to see that whilst the face of white-set passion worked convulsively over the bowed head, the hands tenderly and lovingly stroked the ruffled hair. Just as I had finished, Quincy and Godalming knocked at the door. They entered in obedience to our summons. Van Helsing looked at me questioningly. I understood him to mean that we were to take advantage of their coming to divert, if possible, the thoughts of the unhappy husband and wife from each other and from themselves. So on nodding acquiescence to him, he asked them what they had seen or done, to which Lord Godalming answered, "I could not see him anywhere in the passage, or in any of our rooms. I looked in the study, but, though he had been there, he had gone. He had, however—" He stopped suddenly, looking at the poor drooping figure on the bed. Van Helsing said gravely, "Go on, friend Arthur. We want here no more concealments. Our hope now is in knowing all. Tell freely." So Art went on. He had been there, and though it could only have been for a few seconds, he made rare hay of the place. All the manuscript had been burned, and the blue flames were flickering amongst the white ashes. The cylinders of your phonograph were thrown into the fire, and the wax has helped the flames. Here I interrupted. "Thank God there is another copy in the safe." His face lit for a moment, but fell again as he went on. "I ran downstairs then, but could see no sign of him. I looked into Renfield's room, but there was no trace there except—" Again he paused. "Go on," said Harker hoarsely, so he bowed his head, and moistened his lips with his tongue, added, "except that the poor fellow is dead." Mrs. Harker raised her head, looking from one to the other of us as she said solemnly, "God's will be done." I could not but feel that Art was keeping back something. As I took that it was on with a purpose, I said nothing. Van Helsing turned to Morris and asked, "And you, friend Quincy, have you any to tell?" "A little," he answered. "Maybe much eventually, but at present I can't say. I thought it well to know, if possible, where the Count would go when he left the house. I did not see him, but I saw a bat rise from Renfield's window and flap westward. I expected to see him in some shape go back to Carfax, but he evidently sought some other lair. He will not be back tonight, for the sky is reddening in the east, and the dawn is close. We must work tomorrow." He said the latter words through his shut teeth. For a space of perhaps a couple of minutes there was silence, and I could fancy that I could hear the sound of our hearts beating. Then Van Helsing said, placing his hand very tenderly on Mrs. Harker's head, "And now, Madam Mina, poor dear Madam Mina, tell us exactly what happened. God knows that I do not want that you be pained, but it is need that we all know. For now more than ever, now more than ever has all work to be done, quick and sharp, and in deadly earnest. The day is close to us that must end all, if may be so, and now is the chance that we may live and learn. The poor dear lady shivered, and I could see the tension of her nerves as she clasped her husband closer to her, and bent her head lower and lower still on his breast. Then she raised her head proudly and held out one hand to Van Helsing, who took it in his, and, after stooping and kissing it reverently, held it fast. The other hand was locked in that of her husband, who held his other arm thrown round her protectingly. After a pause in which she was evidently ordering her thoughts, she began. I took the sleeping draught, which you had so kindly given me, but for a long time it did not act. I seemed to become more wakeful, and myriads of horrible fancies began to crowd in upon my mind, all of them connected with death and vampires, with blood and pain and trouble. Her husband involuntarily groaned as she turned to him and said lovingly, Do not fret, dear. You must be brave and strong and help me through the horrible task. If you only knew what an effort it is to me to tell all of this fearful thing at all, you would understand how much I need your help. Well, I saw I must try to help the medicine to its work with my will, if it was to do me any good, so I resolutely set myself to sleep. Sure enough, sleep must have soon come to me, for I remember no more. Jonathan coming in had not waked me, for he lay by my side when next I remember. But there was in the room the same thin white mist that I'd before noticed. But I forget now if you know of this. You will find it in my diary, which I shall show you later. I felt the same vague terror which had come to me before, and the same sense of some presence. I turned to wake Jonathan, but found that he slept so soundly that it seemed as if it was he who'd taken the sleeping draught, and not I. I tried, but I could not wake him. This caused me a great fear, and I looked round, terrified. Then indeed my heart sank within me. Beside the bed, as if he'd stepped out of the mist, or rather as if the mist had turned into his figure, for it had entirely disappeared, stood a tall, thin man, all in black. I knew him at once from the descriptions of the others. The waxen face, the high aquiline nose, on which the light fell in a thin white line, the parted red lips, with the sharp red teeth showing between, and the red eyes, and I had seemed to see in the sunset on the windows of St. Mary's Church at Whitby. I knew, too, the red scar in his forehead where Jonathan had struck him. For an instant my heart stood still, and I would have screamed out, only that I was paralyzed. In the pause he spoke in a sort of keen, cutting whisper, pointing as he spoke at Jonathan. Silence. If you make a sound, I shall take him and dash his brains out before your very eyes. I was appalled and too wildered to do or say anything. With a mocking smile he placed one hand upon my shoulder and, holding me tight, bared my throat with the other, saying as he did so, First, a little refreshment to reward my exertions. You may as well be quiet. It is not the first time or the second that your veins have appeased my thirst. I was bewildered, and strangely enough I did not want to hinder him. I suppose it is a part of the horrible curse that such is when his touch is on the victim. Oh, my God, pity me. He placed his reeking lips upon my throat. Her husband groaned again. She clasped his hand harder and looked at him pityingly, as if he were the injured one, and went on. I felt my strength fading away, and I was in a half swoon. How long this horrible thing lasted I know not, but it seemed that a long time must have passed before he took his foul, awful, sneering mouth away. I saw it drip with the fresh blood. The remembrance seemed for a while to overpower her, and she drooped and would have sunk down but for her husband's sustaining arm. With a great effort she recovered herself and went on. Then he spoke to me mockingly. And so you, like the others, would play your brains against mine. You would help these men to hunt me and frustrate me in my designs. You know now, and they know in part already, and will know in full before long, what it is to cross my path. They should have kept their energies for use closer to home. Whilst they play wits against me who commanded nations, and intrigued for them, and fought for them, hundreds of years before they were born, I was countermining them. And you, their best beloved one, are now to me flesh of my flesh, blood of my blood, kin of my kin, my bountiful winepress for a while, and shall be later on my companion and my helper. You shall be avenged in turn, for not one of them but shall minister to your needs. But as yet you are to be punished for what you have done. You have aided in thwarting me. Now you shall come to my call. When my brain says come to you, you shall cross land or sea to do my bidding, and to that end, this. With that he pulled open his shirt, and with his long, sharp nails opened a vein in his breast. When the blood began to spurt out, he took my hands in one of his, holding them tight, and with the other seized my neck and pressed my mouth to the wound, so that I must either suffocate or swallow some of the... Oh, my God, what have I done? What have I done to deserve such a fate? I have tried to walk in meekness and righteousness all my days. God, pity me. Look down on a poor soul in worse than mortal peril, and in mercy pity those to whom she is dear. Then she began to rub her lips as though to cleanse them from pollution. As she was telling her terrible story, the eastern sky began to quicken, and everything became more and more clear. Parker was still and quiet, but over his face, as the awful narrative went on, came a grey look which deepened and deepened in the morning light, till when the first red streak of the coming dawn shot up, the flesh stood starkly out against the whitening hair. We have arranged that one of us is to stay within call of the unhappy pair till we can meet together and arrange about taking action. Of this I am sure. The sun rises today on no more miserable house in all the great round of its daily course.
Well, I mean, at least she's not dead. I guess she's never gonna die now.
Yeah, she might not ever. Hi, Veronica from Atlanta. Missed your narration voice. You're making Dracula intriguing. I try. I'm glad we're enjoying Dracula.
I am. Like, I don't know. Just, I'm sure there's a lot of, like, deep meaning and everything in it, but...
You like it for the Monty Python qualities, don't you?
Yeah. Reading it now, in this day and age, there's so much that... Yeah. There's so much that is just so hilarious in it. Like, the whole thing, I mean, they probably could have stopped her from drinking his blood if they didn't have that whole discussion in the beginning before they kicked in the door. They're like, oh, well, you know, there may be a vampire in there, but does that really give us the right to barge in on a woman without knocking? Come on, guys, we got to think about this. I am a gentleman, you know. Just what are you? It's like they don't understand the situation that they're in. Yeah, pretty much. Dracula could have killed all of them at this point without even. I mean, he just walks in, and they didn't even know for how long. Dracula's just like, ooh, they went in my house. It's only fair that I just take a little stroll over there.
I actually just had this thought as far as the funny side goes.
Yeah.
Dracula literally mailed himself.
Overnight delivery, FedEx.
Eh.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was not. I thought, oh my god, just go in.
Yeah. That's exactly how I felt. Now she's telling the story. They probably don't even realize what idiots they are, but like, had you just like gone in?
That part might not have even happened.
Yeah. Or, if they noticed any of the signs. Even Renfield noticed. Come on.
Well, rest in peace, Renfield.
I know, poor guy.
And then you're just like, oh yeah, by the way, he's dead.
Yeah, just Dracula on his way out. Just, took him out. Also, Renfield. I mean, logic, I guess, was there. Like, lunatics have a special strength. So I was going to use that power. Like, okay, buddy.
That also, like, dates it, too.
Oh, 100%.
But he tried.
He did.
Also, Dracula.
Gotta give it to him.
Dracula just full out going like, you know what? They're pissing me off. I'm gonna make you a vampire. And then let you eat them. Suck it.
Literally.
That's the plan.
See what you did there.
This was a long one, too. This was kind of a long chapter.
This was. And also Quincy. The vampire just flew outside. Let me run outside and hide under the tree in the dark. What could go wrong?
He's brave. Never said he was smart.
Where's your gun at this point, Quincy?
Maybe he had
right
it with
there.
him. Oh, like why didn't he just shoot him?
Yeah.
Great question.
Walk in there, start blasting.
Anyways, I started blasting.
Should design some like wooden bullets, like a little wooden stake bullets. Give them to Quincy. Let him go ham.
Maybe he didn't want to hit Mina on accident. Or Jonathan.
At this point, you take that risk.
Kudos to Jonathan. Kudos to
Jonathan. What? He was asleep.
No. Because like after hearing all this, he's just like, she's like, no, don't touch me. I'm dirty. He's like, shh, you stop that. I will cuddle you harder.
Fair enough. Yeah.
He loves her.
Yeah, he does.
He like really loves her. So like Jonathan gets props. And also Jonathan now is like, I'm gonna kill that lizard. Dark Shadows and Barnabas Collins fighting vampires. Seriously. I never watched Dark Shadows, so can't say. I did watch the terrible Johnny Depp movie remake, but I never watched the show. So, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I saw the Johnny Depp remake.
The movie was terrible.
That was real bad.
So I have just like plain decaf black with some honey in it. Nothing crazy.
I got some like Earl Grey.
Ooh.
I think it was.
I like some Earl Grey. I needed to get some after this chapter because my mouth was just getting so dry.
Yeah, that stuff happens.
And I don't know why. Like, last time we read, I didn't have the issue. But, like, for whatever reason, this time tonight, like, I just was, like, constantly just getting dry.
Well, to be fair, it sounded good.
Oh, well, that's good. I'm glad it was good.
It was nice to hear your Dracula again. It's been too long.
It's been a long time, right? I was like, I could read it as if Mina's telling it, but I was like, nah. Let's throw some.
You get the chance to do Dracula, you got to do Dracula.
Yeah. Haven't had much much time to do it.
And another thing, like, that's how easy it is to bribe Renfield. Renfield got mad because Dracula decided not to bring some bloat flies.
I mean, Renfield was crazy.
Yeah. But, I don't know. Seems like another level of... Renfield was crazy, but he did show that he was intelligent in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think he got mesmerized by the Count. Like, I think he just became enthralled with the idea of, like, the immortality and all that.
Yeah.
Um,
But then the Count was like, well, you can't live forever on flies. Renfield was like, it doesn't sound like it's for me then. How about spiders? Okay, will spiders work? No cats, though. No.
no, if you're eating cats, deal's off.
That's the good movies Johnny Depp starred in. Pirates of the Caribbean. Pirates of the Caribbean was great. What?
Sleepy Hollow. I love Sleepy Hollow.
Was he? He was in that.
He's Ichabod Crane in that movie. I love that movie.
I was about to say Edward Scissorhands.
Yeah, Edward Scissorhands. Yep. Edward Scissorhands is one of my favorites. What's Eating Gilbert Grape is really good.
I wasn't a huge fan of that movie.
I love that movie.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, he really hasn't been in...
Chocolat. I like that.
It was really Pirates of the Caribbean.
What? I just listed good ones.
I know, but like... They were good, but nothing like Pirates.
Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Ooh, okay, he was really good in that one.
How can you not say Edward Scissorhands is a great movie? Edward Scissorhands is amazing.
I never said it wasn't.
Um,
I'm just saying Pirates of the Caribbean was definitely his biggest role.
he was in Corpse Bride.
You know, just while we're on the topic of it, worst movie he was in was probably Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
I didn't like that.
It was weird.
I did not like that.
No, it was creepy.
Christopher Lee being in it or not. Yeah, I did not. No.
All right, do we want to read another chapter? You feeling up to it?
We can. It is a long one.
I mean, I'm good with it as long as you are.
Okay. Let's do it. Let's read another one.
Late night for all the vampires to hear.
Yes. Also, can I just say before we start, Dr. Seward is so depressed. Oh my god.
I mean, wouldn't you be?
He's been depressed since the beginning of this book, though. Like, oh my lord. This is a miserable dude.
Look, he lives in a house filled with insane people. There's not a lot of good going on for him right now. And now there's a vampire trying to kill him. And apparently his best friend who he loves dearly, who he's known for all of 2 days, Mina, because everyone loves Mina after 5 minutes with her, is about to, I guess, not die, but
Oh
definitely
yeah,
not.
and the girl he liked rejected him and then died.
He's had a pretty rough go of it. So I think he has reason to be depressed. Just saying.
All right. All right. Oh, Jonathan. All right. Chapter 22. Jonathan Harker's Journal. 3rd October. As I must do something or go mad, I write this diary. Sounds very on brand, sir, for you. It is now 6 o'clock, and we are to meet in the study in half an hour, to take something to eat, for Dr. Van Helsing and Dr. Seward are agreed that if we do not eat, we cannot work our best. Our best will be, God knows, required today. I must keep writing at every chance, for I dare not stop to think. All, big and little, must go down. Perhaps at the end the little things may teach us most. The teaching, big or little, could not have landed Mina or me anywhere worse than we are today. However, we must trust and hope. Poor Mina told me just now, with the tears running down her dear cheeks, that it is in trouble and trial that our faith is tested, that we must keep on trusting, and that God will aid us up to the end. The end. Oh my God, what end? To work, to work. When Dr. Van Helsing and Dr. Seward had come back from seeing poor Renfield, we went gravely into what was to be done. First, Dr. Seward... Oh my God. First, Dr. Seward told us that when he and Dr. Van Helsing had gone down to the room below, they had found Renfield lying on the floor all in a heap. His face was all bruised and crushed in, and the bones of the neck were broken. Dr. Seward asked the attendant who was on duty in the passage if he had heard anything. He said he had been sitting down. He confessed to half dozing, when he heard loud voices in the room, and then Renfield had called out loudly several times, "God! God! God!" After that there was a sound of falling, and when he entered the room he found him lying on the floor, face down, just as the doctors had seen him. Van Helsing asked if he had heard voices or a voice, and said he could not say, that at first it seemed to him as if there were two, but as there was no one in the room it could have only been one. He could swear to it if required, and the word God was spoken by the patient. Dr. Seward said to us, when we were alone, that he did not wish to go into the matter. The question of an inquest had to be considered, and it would never do to put forward the truth, as no one would believe it. As it was, he thought that on the attendant's evidence he would give a certificate of death by misadventure in falling from bed. In case the coroner should demand it, there would be a formal inquest, necessarily to the same result. Yeah, I'm sure they're going to believe he just fell out of bed. When the question began to discuss as to what should be our next step, the very next thing we decided was that Mina should be in full confidence, that nothing of any sort, no matter how painful, should be kept from her. She herself agreed as to its wisdom, and it was pitiful to see her so brave, and yet so sorrowful, and in such a depth of despair. "There must be no concealment," she said. "Alas, we have had too much already, and besides, there is nothing in all the world that can give me more pain than I have already endured, than I suffer now. Whatever may happen, it must be of new hope or of new courage to me." Van Helsing was looking at her fixedly as she spoke, and said suddenly, but very quietly, But my dear Madam Mina, are you not afraid? Not for yourself, but for others from yourself, after what has happened?" Her face grew set in its lines, but her eyes shone with the devotion of a martyr as she answered, No, for my mind is made up." "To what?" he asked gently, while we were all very still, for each in our own way we had a sort of vague idea what she meant. Her answer came with direct simplicity, as though she was stating a simple fact. "Because I find in myself, and I shall watch keenly for it, a sign of harm to any that I love. I shall die." "You would not kill yourself?" he asked hoarsely. "I would, if there were no friend who loved me, who would save me from such a pain and so desperate an effort." She looked at him meaningly as she spoke. He was sitting down, but now he rose and came close to her and put his hand on her head as he said solemnly, "My child, there is such an one if it were for your good. For myself, I could hold it in my account with God to find such an euthanasia for you, but even at this moment, if it were best, nay, were it safe. But, my child, For a moment he seemed choked, and a great sob rose in his throat. He gulped it down, and went on. There are here some who would stand between you and death. You must not die. You must not die by any hand, least of all by your own, until the other, who has fouled your sweet life, is true dead. You must not die. For if he is still with the quick undead, your death would make you even as he is. No, you must live. You must struggle and try to live, though death would seem a boon unspeakable. You must fight death himself, though he come to you in pain or in joy, by the night or by the day or the night, in safety or in peril. On your living soul I charge that you do not die, nay, nor think of death, till this great evil be past. The poor dear grew white as death, and shock and shivered, as I have seen a quicksand shake and shiver at the incoming of the tide. We were all silent. We could do nothing. At length she grew more calm, and turning to him said, sweetly, oh so sorrowfully, as she held out her hand, I promise you, my dear friend, that if God will let me live, I shall strive to do so, till, if it may be in his good time, this horror may have passed away from me. She was so good and brave that we all felt that our hearts were strengthened to work and endure for her, and we began to discuss what we were to do. I told her that she was to have all the papers in the safe, and all the papers or diaries or phonographs we might hereafter use, and was to keep the record as she had done before. She was pleased with the prospect of anything to do, if pleased could be used in connection with so grim an interest. As usual, Van Helsing had thought ahead of everyone else, and was prepared with an exact ordering of our work. It is perhaps well, he said, that our meeting after our visit to Carfax, we decided not to do anything with the earth boxes that lay there. Had we done so, the Count must have guessed our purpose, and would have doubtless taken measures in advance to frustrate such an effort with regard to the others. But now he does not know our intentions. Nay, more in all probability, he does not know that such a power exists to us as can sterilize his layers, so that he cannot use them as of old. We are now so much further advanced in our knowledge as to their disposition that, when we have examined a house in Piccadilly, we may track the very last of them. Today, then, is ours, and it rests our hope. The sun that rose on our sorrow this morning guards us in its course. Until it sets tonight, that monster must retain whatever form he has now. He is confined within the limitations of his earthly envelope. He cannot melt into thin air, nor disappear through cracks or chinks or crannies. If he go through a doorway, he must open the door like a mortal, and so we have this day to hunt out all his lairs and sterilize them. So we shall, if we have not yet catch and destroy him, drive him to bay in some other place where the catching and the destroying shall be, in time, sure. Here I started up, for I could not contain myself at the thought that the minutes and seconds, so preciously laden with Mina's life and happiness, were flying from us, since whilst we talked action was impossible. But Van Helsing held up his hand warningly. Nay, friend Jonathan, he said. In this, the quickest way home is the longest way, as your proverbs say. We shall all act, and act with desperate quick, when the time has come. But think, in all the probable, the key of the situation is in that house in Piccadilly. The Count may have many houses which he has bought. Of them he will have deeds of purchase, keys, and other things. He will have paper that he write on. He will have his book of checks. There are many belongings that he must have somewhere. Why not in this place so central, so quiet, where he come and go by the front of the back at all hour, when in the very vast of the traffic there is none to notice? We shall go there and search that house, and when we learn what it holds, then we do what our friend Arthur call, in his phrases of hunt, stop the earths, and so we run down our old fox. So, is it not? Then let us come at once, I cried. We are wasting the precious, precious time. The professor did not move, but simply said, And how are we going to get into that house in Piccadilly? Anyway, I cried. We shall break in if need be. And your police, where would they be, and what would they say? I was staggered, but I knew that if he wished to delay, he had a good reason for it. So I said as quietly as I could, "Don't wait more than need be. You know, I am sure, what torture I am in." "Ah, my child, that I do. And indeed there is no wish of me to add to your anguish. But just think, what can we do until all the world be at movement? Then will come our time. I have thought, and it seems to me the simplest way is the best of all. Now we wish to get into that house, but we have no keys. Is it not so?" I nodded. "Now suppose that you are in truth the owner of that house, and could still not get in, and think there was to you no conscience of the housebreaker. What would you do?" "I would get a respectable locksmith and set him to work to pick the lock for me." "And your police, would interfere, would they not?" "Oh, no, not if they knew the man was properly employed." "Then," he looked at me keenly as he spoke, "all that is in doubt is the conscience of the employer and the belief of your policeman as to whether or not that employer has a good conscience or a bad one. Your police must indeed be zealous men and clever, oh, so clever, in reading the heart, that they trouble themselves in such matter. No, no, my friend Jonathan. You go take the lock of 100 empty house in this your London, or of any city in the world, and you do it as such things are rightly done, and at the time such things are rightly done, no one will interfere. I read of a gentleman who owned so fine house in London, and when he went for months of summer to Switzerland and lock up his house, some burglar came and broke window at back and got in. Then he went and made open the shutters in the front and walk out in through the door before the very eyes of the police. Then he have an auction in that house and advertise it and put up big notice. And when the day come, he sell off by a great auctioneer all the goods of that other man who owned them. Then he go to a builder and he sell him that house, making an agreement that he pull it down and take all away within a certain time. And your police and other authority help him all they can. And when that owner came back from his holiday in Switzerland, he find only an empty hole where his house had been. This was all done en règle, and in our work we shall be en règle too. It shall not go so early that the policemen who have then little to think of shall seem it strange. But we shall go after 10 o'clock, when there are many about, and such things would be done when we were indeed owners of the house." I could not but see how right he was, and the terrible despair of Mina's face became relaxed a thought. There was hope in such good counsel. Van Helsing went on. "And once within the boxes we may find more clues. At any rate, some of us can remain there, while the rest find other places where there be more earth boxes. At Bermondsey and Mile End." Lord Godalming stood up. "I can be of some use there," he said. "I shall wire to my people to have horses and carriages where they will be most convenient." "Look here, old fella," said Morris. "It is a capital idea to have all in ready in case we want to go horsebacking. But don't you think that one of your snappy carriages with its heraldic adornments and a byway of Walworth or Mile End would attract too much attention for our purposes? Seems to me that we ought to take cabs when we go south or east, and even leave 'em somewhere near the neighborhoods we are going to." "Friend Quincy is right," said the professor. "His head is what you call in plane with the horizon. It is a difficult thing we go to do, and we do not want no peoples to watch us if so it may." Mina took a growing interest in everything, and I was rejoiced to see the exigency of affairs was helping her to forget for a time the terrible experience of the night. She was very, very pale, almost ghastly, and so thin that her lips were drawn away, showing her teeth in somewhat of prominence. I didn't mention this last, lest it should give her needless pain, but it made my blood run cold in my veins to think of what had occurred with poor Lucy when the Count had sucked her blood. As yet there was no sign of the teeth growing sharper, but the time as yet was short, and there was time for fear. When we came to the discussion of the sequence of our efforts and of the disposition of our forces, there were new sources of doubt. It was finally agreed that before starting for Piccadilly we should destroy the Count's lair close at hand, In case he should find it out too soon, we could thus still be ahead of him in our work of destruction, and his presence in his purely material shape, and at his weakest, might give us some new clue. As for the disposal of forces, it was suggested by the Professor that, after our visit to Carfax, we should all enter the house in Piccadilly, that the 2 doctors and I should remain there, whilst Lord Godalming and Quincy found the layers at Walworth and Mile End and destroyed them. It was possible, if not likely, the Professor urged, that the Count might appear in Piccadilly during the day, and that if so we might be able to cope with him then and there. At any rate, we might be able to follow him in force. To this plan I strenuously objected, and as so far as my going was concerned, for I said I intended to stay and protect Mina, I thought that my mind was made up on the subject, but Mina would not listen to my objection. She said that there might be some law matter in which I could be useful, that amongst the Count's papers might be some clue which I could understand out of my experience in Transylvania, and that as it was, all the strength we could muster was required to cope with the Count's extraordinary power. I had to give in, for Mina's resolution was fixed. She said that it was the last hope for her that we should all work together. "As for me," she said, "I have no fear. Things have been as bad as they can be, and whatever may happen, must have it in some element of hope for comfort. Go, my husband. God can, if he wishes it, to guard me as well alone as with anyone present." So I started up crying out, "Then in God's name let us come at once, for we are losing time. The Count may come to Piccadilly earlier than we think." "Not so," said Van Helsing, holding up his hand. "But why?" "Did you forget," he said with actually a smile, "that last night he banqueted heavily, and was sleep late?" Did I forget? Shall I ever? Can I ever? Can any of us forget that terrible scene? Mina struggled hard to keep her brave countenance, but the pain overmastered her, and she put her hands before her face, and shuddered whilst she moaned. Van Helsing had not intended to recall her frightful experience. He had simply lost sight of her and her part in the affair in his intellectual effort. When it struck him what he had said, he was horrified at his thoughtlessness, and tried to comfort her. "Oh, Madam Mina," he said, "dear, dear Madam Mina, alas, that I of all who so reverence you should have said something any so forgetful. These stupid old lips of mine and this stupid old head do not deserve so. But you will forget it, will you not?" He bent low beside her as he spoke. She took his hand and looking at him through her tears, said hoarsely, "No, I shall not forget, for it is well that I remember, and with it I have so much in memory of you that is sweet, that I take it altogether. Now you must all be going soon. Breakfast is ready, and we must all eat that we may be strong." Breakfast was a strange meal to us all. We tried to be cheerful and encourage each other, and Mina was the brightest and most cheerful of us. When it was over, Van Helsing stood up and said, "Now, my dears, we go forth to our terrible enterprise. Are we all armed as we were on the night when we visited our enemy's lair, armed against ghostly as well as carnal attack?" We all assured him. "Then it is well. Now, Madam Mina, you are in any case quite safe here until the sunset, and before then we shall return, But before we go, let me see you armed against personal attack. I have myself, since you come down, prepared your chamber by the placing of things of which we know, so that he may not enter. Now let me guard yourself. On the forehead I touch this piece of sacred wafer, in the name of the Father, the Son, and—" There was a fearful scream which almost froze our hearts to hear. As he had placed the wafer on Mina's forehead, it had seared it, had burned into the flesh as though it had been a piece of white-hot metal. My poor darling's brain had told her the significance of the fact as quickly as her nerves received the pain of it, and the two so overwhelmed her that her overwrought nature had its voice in that dreadful scream. But the words to her thought came quickly. The echo of the scream had not ceased to ring on the air when there came the reaction, and she sank on her knees on the floor in an agony of abasement. Pulling her beautiful hair over her face, as the leper of old his mantle, she wailed out, Unclean, unclean. Even the Almighty shuns my polluted flesh. I must bear this mark of shame upon my forehead until the judgment day. They all paused. I had thrown myself beside her in an agony of helpless grief, and putting my arms round her, held her tight. For a few minutes our sorrowful hearts beat together, while the friends around us turned their eyes away, that ran tears silently. Then Van Helsing turned and said gravely, so gravely that I could not help feeling that he was in some way inspired, and was stating things outside himself. It may be that you have to bear that mark till God himself see fit, as he most surely will, on the judgment day, to redress all wrongs of the earth and of his children that he had placed thereon. And oh, Madam Mina, my dear, may we who love you be there to see, when that red scar, the sign of God's knowledge of what has been, shall pass away, and leave your forehead as pure as the heart we know. For so surely as we live, that scar shall pass away when God sees right to lift a burden that is hard upon us. Till then we bear our cross, as his Son did obedience to his will. It may be that we are chosen instruments of his good pleasure, and that we ascend to his bidding as that other through stripes and shame, through tears and blood, through doubts and fears, and all that makes the difference between God and man. There was hope in his words and comfort, and they made for resignation. Mina and I both felt so, and simultaneously we took one of the old man's hands and bent over and kissed it. And without a word we all knelt together, and all holding hands, swore to be true to each other. We men pledged ourselves to raise the veil of sorrow from the head of her whom, each in his own way, we loved, and we prayed for help and guidance in the terrible task which lay before us. It was then time to start. So I said farewell to Mina, a parting which neither of us shall forget to our dying day, and we set out. To one thing I have made up my mind. If we find out that Mina must be a vampire in the end, then she shall not go into that unknown and terrible land alone. I suppose it is thus that in old times one vampire meant many. Just as their hideous bodies could only rest in sacred earth, so the holiest love was the recruiting agent for their ghastly ranks. We entered Carfax without trouble and found all things the same as on the first occasion. It was hard to believe that amongst so prosaic surroundings of neglect and dust and decay there was any ground for such fear as we already knew. Had not our minds been made up, and there had not been terrible memories to spur us on, we could hardly have proceeded with our task. We found no papers or any sign of use in the house, and in the old chapel the great boxes looked just as we had seen them last. Dr. Van Helsing told us solemnly as we stood before them. And now, friends, we have a duty to do. We must sterilize the earth, so sacred of holy memories, that he has brought from a far, distant land for such fell use. He has chosen this earth because it has been holy. Thus we defeat him with his own weapon, for we make it more holy still. It was sanctified to such use of man. Now we sanctify it to God. As he spoke, he took from his bag a screwdriver and a wrench, and very soon the tops of one of the cases was thrown open. The earth smelled musty and close, but we did not somehow seem to mind, for our attention concentrated on the professor. Taking from his box a piece of the sacred wafer, he laid it reverently on the earth, and then shutting down the lid began to screw it home, we aiding him as he worked. One by one we treated in the same way each of the great boxes, and left them as we had found them to all appearance, but in each was a portion of the host. When we closed the door behind us, the professor said solemnly, "So much is already done. If it may be that with all the others we can be so successful, then the sunset of this very evening may shine on Madam Mina's forehead all white as ivory, and with no stain." As we passed across the lawn on our way to the station to catch our train, we could see the front of the asylum. I looked eagerly, and in the window of my room saw Mina. I waved my hand to her and nodded to tell our work there was successfully accomplished. She nodded in reply to show she understood. The last I saw, she was waving her hand in farewell. It was with a heavy heart that we sought the station and just caught the train, which was streaming in as we reached the platform. I have written this on the train. Oh, okay. Piccadilly, 12 o'clock. Piccadilly, 12:30 o'clock. Just before we reached Fenchurch Street, Lord Godalming said to me, "Quincy and I will find a blacksmith. You had better not come with us in case there should be any difficulty, for under the circumstances it wouldn't seem so bad for us to break into an empty house. But you are a solicitor, and the Incorporated Law Society might tell you that you should have known better." I demurred as to my not sharing any danger even of odium, but he went on. "Besides, it'll attract less attention if there are not too many of us. My title will make it all right with the locksmith, and with any policeman that may come along. You'd better go with Jack and the Professor and stay in the Green Park, somewhere in sight of the house, and when you see the door opened and the smith has gone away, do you all come across. We shall be on the lookout for you, and shall let you in." "This advice is good," said Van Helsing, so we said no more. Godalming and Morris hurried off in a cab, we following in another. At the corner of Arlington Street our contingent got out and strolled into the Green Park. My heart beat as I saw the house on which so much of our hope was centred, looming up grim and silent in its deserted condition amongst its more lively and spruce-looking neighbours. We sat down on a bench within good view and began to smoke cigars so as to attract as little attention as possible. The minutes seemed to pass with leaden feet, and as we waited for the coming of the others. At length we saw a four-wheeler drive up. Out of it, in leisurely fashion, got Lord Godalming and Morris, and down from the box descended a thick-set working-man with his rush-woven basket of tools. Morris paid the cabman, who touched his hat and drove away. Together the two ascended the steps, and Lord Godalming pointed out what he wanted done. The workman took off his coat leisurely and hung it on one of the spikes of the rail, saying something to a policeman who had just sauntered along. The policeman nodded acquiescence, and the man kneeling down placed his bag beside him. After searching through it, he took out a selection of tools which he produced to lay beside him in orderly fashion. Then he stood up, looked into the keyhole, blew into it, and turning to his employers made some remark. Lord Godalming smiled, and the man lifted a good-sized bunch of keys. Selecting one of them, he began to probe the lock, as if feeling his way with it. After fumbling about for a bit, he tried a second, and then a third. All at once the door opened under a slight push from him, and he and the two others entered the hall. We sat still. My own cigar burnt furiously, but Van Helsing's went cold altogether. We waited patiently as we saw the workman come out and bring in his bag. Then he held the door slightly open, steadying it with his knees, whilst he fitted a key to the lock. This he finally handed to Lord Godalming, who took out his purse and gave him something. The man touched his hat, took his bag, put on his coat, and departed. Not a soul took the slightest notice of the whole transaction. When the man had fairly gone, we three crossed the street and knocked at the door. It was immediately opened by Quincy Morris, beside whom stood Lord Godalming lighting a cigar. "This place smells so vilely," said the latter as we came in. Did indeed smell vilely, like the old chapel at Carfax, and with our previous experience it was plain to us that the Count had been using the place pretty freely. We moved to explore the house, all keeping together in case of attack, for we knew he had a strong and wily enemy to deal with, and as yet we did not know whether the Count might not be in the house. In the dining room, which lay at the back of the hall, we found 8 boxes of earth. 8 only out of the 9 which we sought. 8 boxes only out of the 9 which we sought. Our work was not over, and never would be until we should have found the missing box. First we opened the shutters of the window, which looked out across a narrow stone-flagged yard at the blank face of a stable, pointed to look like the front of a miniature house. There were no windows in it, so we were not afraid of being overlooked. We did not lose any time in examining the chests. With the tools we had brought with us, we opened them one by one, and treated them as we had treated those in the old chapel. It was evident to us that the Count was not at present in the house, and we proceeded to search for any of his effects. After a cursory glance at the rest of the rooms, from basement to attic, we came to the conclusion that the dining room contained any effects which might belong to the Count, and so we proceeded to minutely examine them. They lay in a sort of orderly disorder on the great dining room table. There were title deeds of the Piccadilly house in a great bundle, deeds of the purchase of the houses at Mile End and Bermondsey, note-paper envelopes, and pen and ink. All were covered up in thin wrapping paper to keep them from the dust. There was also a clothes brush, a brush and comb, and a jug and basin, the latter containing dirty water which was reddened as if with blood. Last of all was a little heap of keys of all sorts and sizes, probably those belonging to the other houses. When we had examined this last find, Lord Godalming and Quincy Morris, taking accurate notes of the various addresses of the houses in the east and the south, took with them the keys in a great bunch, and set out to destroy the boxes in these places. The rest of us are, with what patience we can, waiting their return, or the coming of the Count.
Oh no, what is going to happen?
Oh no, what's going to happen next?
Serious kind of trend I'm seeing. We're talking about, like, I'm sure there's a serious theme or something through here. I think the theme is listen to the women.
Listen to the women?
Because it seems like even Mina, now becoming a vampire, is the only one who has, like, sense. She's, like, the one still thinking logically.
She is. She's got a Jesus bread tattoo on her forehead now.
Yeah, it's not a tattoo.
Scar.
Brand.
Got a Jesus cracker brand on her forehead.
Mm-hmm. They better hope she doesn't turn into a vampire, because she could outsmart all of them using half her brain.
Right? Her and Dracula teamed up.
Right. Even Dracula has been kind of... I mean, he really hasn't had to try too hard yet, but not really the cleverest of vampires.
Dracula?
Yeah. Like I said, they haven't forced him to...
Destroying the boxes reminds me of destroying the Horcruxes. Yeah, it definitely has a vibe.
Yeah, is this where it all started?
I could definitely get the theme of it. Because, like, Van Helsing is like Dumbledore saying, like, we cannot truly destroy him until we destroy all of the boxes.
Yeah. Yeah. And Dracula definitely has that kind of Voldemort theme, I guess. Feel, I guess. Because he could easily wipe everyone out if he wanted to, but I don't know. He wants to put on this show and play his little games.
And he also exchanged blood with Mina.
Well, that's what I mean with, like, playing his games, you know. Could easily have killed all of them, drank their blood, and moved on. He's like, no, now I'm going to mess with you and turn her into a vampire.
Make her come and get you.
Yeah.
You can do it, Bobans. It's okay.
Also, nice, a costume party. What did you dress up as, Melanie?
Oh, yes, and what was the party fun? Also an important question. In my brain, I'm just like, okay, we destroyed some boxes. Mina is very sad because she's impure. Oh, also, Jonathan.
What about Jonathan?
Just being like, Jonathan just being like, yeah, well, you know what? If Mina becomes a vampire, I'll just become a vampire too, so we never have to be separated from each other.
Right? What a good guy.
True love.
Yeah.
True love.
Stupid. Oh yeah, true love.
He's saying you would kill me if I became a vampire.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. No hesitation. Why?
Because if I don't, then you're trapped in this like hellish state for all eternity. And we saw with Lucy in her like times of clear thought, like she didn't want that. She was like conscious of what she was becoming. So like you're somewhere between life and death, but is the conscious part of your soul still there? Just kind of going along? Like, do you have those moments as a vampire?
I guess it depends on your personality.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, Mina doesn't want it. Lucy didn't want it. And we saw that. So, for Mina, I feel like it would be torturous to be a vampire. Meanwhile, you know, like Dracula, he gets off on this stuff. Renfield was halfway there.
You think I would not have a good time?
I don't think so. I don't know. Maybe you would. Get to bat around and suck blood.
That.
All right, well, a few of the guests dressed up as members of the Addams family. Ooh, nice. Anyone dress up as, not Thing. What was the hand?
The Thing.
Was that the thing? I thought the Thing was the hair.
That's Cousin It.
Cousin It, okay.
Wow. No shit, do you?
No, not about
or
the
Mr.
Addams family.
Thing or something. Either way, yeah. No,
I remember
he's just
them,
Thing.
but
It's not the Thing. He's just Thing.
Okay.
No, yeah. I think the golden calf costume sounds really cool. I want to see it.
I don't think
Yeah.
vampires feel love emotion. Yeah, I don't think. Well, yeah. Well, no, we had that scene with Dracula in the beginning, where he was talking with his other
Brides.
wives. Yeah, brides.
He's
And,
like, no, I can love.
You of all should know that. But does he now, or did he? Was he capable of love before, but now, as a vampire, he's not?
Excellent questions.
But I guess we kind of have a little evidence there that vampires can feel love. Maybe their idea of love is just screwed up. You know, want to go out to a nice dinner, a long walk on the beach. They want to go for a stroll through the cemetery and suck some neck.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Don't yuck their yum.
Oh, no, it's okay to yuck their yums. That's gross.
Wow. Judgy over here.
I will judge vampires, yes.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I think we got a vampire hater over here. How I feel about that, to be honest.
I never said I hate vampires. I
You're
will judge
you're
them.
hating on them right now.
I don't hate them.
A little bit.
I just hate their taste.
All right, so we destroyed the Carfax boxes. We destroyed the Piccadilly boxes. Arthur and Quincy went to go destroy the other boxes. Who do you think is showing up? Do you think it's going to be Arthur and Quincy, or do you think Dracula's going to show up?
Dracula.
Be like, bro, what are you doing in my house?
Yeah. Where are we? Chapter 23 now? We have 3 more chapters.
Chapter 23 is the next one. There's 27 chapters.
27? Yeah, it's Dracula.
Yeah, it's Dracula. 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. We have 5 more chapters left.
We got too much time. There has to be a curveball thrown.
Yeah, it's gotta be Dracula.
Gotta be Dracula.
You know who these guys also remind me of? It just made me think about how it would go down if this was happening. There was a vampire in town, and everyone had to like put a team together to destroy him.
Yeah.
But in Letterkenny.
Yeah, I could see that. Well, pitter patter.
When a
Foxes
friend
aren't
asks for
good.
help, you help him.
That's Quincy.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is. I heard they were sucking blood over there, that allegedly.
No, I think Dracula is definitely going to show up. Either that or it will be like Dracula won't show up, and then we're going to have like 2 chapters of just Jonathan and Nina going back and forth on whether he kills her or becomes a vampire himself.
I see. Okie dokie.
But I think Dracula is going to show up. That's how I would write it, I guess. For a little bit more, tension, suspense. What do you think?
I know what's going to happen, so I'm not going to say anything.
Well, fine.
Looking to see how long the next chapter is. Long ones.
It's a pretty long one.
Yeah, next one's pretty long. Dang. So is the next one after that.
That's what I mean. There's too much here
Something's going to happen.
for it to just be over. Yeah. There has to be a curveball. Something's going to happen.
Something's going to happen. I guess we're going to find out in the next one.
Next time.
Next time. Because I don't know if I can read another one. I feel like my eyeballs are getting, I look like squinty. I'm trying to read.
No worries. I mean, I'm getting pretty tired too.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting to be that time.
It is a little late. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you have enjoyed our reading of De Potter. I'm glad everyone is also enjoying the Dracula.
It is a lot better than I thought it was going to be, honestly. I'm fully enjoying it.
Heck yeah, we're liking it. Yes, we're liking Dracula because it is a good book. What did you think it was going to be?
I don't know. I guess in a way I thought it was going to be better, but in another way I think it is better. It's
okay.
I thought it was going to be better, but it's better. Like I don't know, reading it just it's a lot funnier than I thought. And like I don't know. Like it's written well, but the characters, man. I don't know. It's just so weird. Some of the things they say just feel like someone wrote a spoof of Dracula, what I expected it to be, with like the whole friendship thing and everything. Friendship will get us through this. Hold hands in a circle. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. I just have I'm pleasantly surprised that you're enjoying it as much as you are, because I thought for sure that there would be bits of this where you would just be like, oh my god, I can't do this anymore.
There was what chapters was it? It was like somewhere from like 10 to 15 or whatever when it was just going back and forth and no one was doing anything. We haven't seen Dracula since like chapter 4.
The whole Lucy thing.
Yeah.
The blood transfusions, the this, the that.
Yeah, it was like reading a medical textbook, like the first blood transfusions or treatments. Yeah, that was a rough part.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah.
But like after we got out of those trenches, like it's picked right back up. I still think like the first few chapters when Harker is in Count's castle, that's the best part of the book for me so far. That was really well done.
Yeah.
That was kind of how I expected the rest of the book to be, because I was like really well done with like suspenseful and everything, and you know, Jonathan didn't feel like I don't even know, just he didn't feel like a parody of himself, you know?
Yeah. Felt like a normal dude in a crazy situation.
Yeah.
How someone would potentially like react in the same situation.
And then it seemed like it just got like everyone was serious, but you know, like I said, needed, I guess, to tell the story, but very dry spell. And then we got to the point where Dracula is just kind of, you know, sucking Mina's blood while they're downstairs, just like, I don't know how we can find this guy. He's so elusive. He could be anywhere.
And he's upstairs.
Yeah.
Yep. He's in there. Did we knock first? How do we go? Should we go in? What do we do? Also, I don't know why.
Is anyone gonna tell Mina we could have saved your life? But you know, we had a debate.
I also don't know why I found it very funny, but when they break down the door, I just find it really funny that Jonathan says, "We broke the door," or no, Dr. Seward. Yeah, Dr. Seward says we broke the door open with such force that we almost fell over. Well, actually, Van Helsing did fall over. Like, I don't know why that just like.
Because it seems like something out of a comedy.
Yeah.
Where they're all just like pushing.
Yeah, that's how I pictured it. That's how I pictured it. They all like stumbled in. Just
Dracula's just standing there like, oh my God. These are the people who killed Lucy? I was wrong about that one, apparently.
Just the idea of that. I don't know. The way he wrote it. We almost fell. Well, Dr. Van Helsing did fall. I don't know. And now they're like this ragtag like friendship group.
Yeah.
Of like the proper English lord, a lawyer, an old professor, a doctor, and a cowboy. Like, what is this Avengers team that we have here? My God.
Yeah. I don't know. It's great, though. I like it.
Yeah. Oh, dear animals. What's happening out there? Bailey's having a sad.
But, yeah, either way, a lot better than I thought.
That's good. I guess we'll see what happens next time.
All right.
Tomorrow. We will do tomorrow. We'll read more tomorrow. We will be starting earlier tomorrow and hopefully reading more. Because next week is indeed Halloween, and we are going to finish this before Halloween.
Yes, allegedly.
So
no, we're only 6 chapters.
We got like 5. We got 5 left. Yeah.
All right, everyone. Have a good night.
Have a good night.
We'll see you tomorrow.
See y'all tomorrow.